Good evening, everyone. I hope you've been doing well. It's been a while since my last video, and I wasn't planning on making a video, but on Saturday morning, I had a dream, and I can never remember my dreams, but as I woke up from the dream, I just heard this voice repeating, Boaz, Boaz, Boaz. And I thought, okay, I definitely need to look at the story of Ruth as the bride of Christ again, because there's obviously something I missed. And that's what I did. And what I found is very interesting. I think you are going to like this. But before I begin, I just need to quickly reiterate that to count biblically, and this is from Blue Letter Bible, part of the description of a day, says any part of a day is counted as a whole day. So basically, if something happened at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, that would be day one, and you count from there onwards. I just always think to reiterate these things for people that might not have seen any other previous video and are fairly new to the full moon calendar. But yeah, you're going to be surprised with what comes out here. I basically quickly need to recap Ruth's timeline for you guys. And we read in Ruth 1 verse 4, and they took them wives of the women of Moab. The name of the one was Orpah, and the name of the other Ruth. And they dwelt there about 10 years. So here we have the Revelation 12 sign in 2017, and that is year 1, and it goes to year 10, it's 2026. And from there on we have the 7 years to the end of days. That is basically Ruth's timeline, and I just quickly want to show you guys more detail on this part. So this is more detail on the timeline in Ruth 2 verse 23. So she stayed close to the women of Boaz to glean until the end of the barley harvest and the wheat harvest, and she lived with her mother-in-law. Basically, this is just the timeline of the 7 weeks to get from the barley harvest. She arrived at Passover up to the wheat harvest, and you can go week 1, it's the beginning of the barley harvest, and that would be the Feast of First Fruits, and then week 2 to 6 would be the barley harvest transitioning into the wheat harvest. Week 7, that's 49 days, that's basically the counting of the Omer, and then post-harvest, which would be day 50, is Shavuot, and that was in the story of Ruth, her marriage to Boaz. So after my dream, I realized that obviously there's something I missed. So I read through the book of Ruth again, looking for information that could be of significance. And I came across Ruth 3 verse 17, where she says, and she said, these 6 measures of barley gave he me, for he said to me, go not empty unto thy mother-in-law. And I just wondered to myself, okay, I'll keep a note of the 6. I wondered, why 6? Why not 5? Why not 7? Why not 10? Why 6? And I continued reading, and a couple of verses later, I found another interesting verse. Now, you have to keep in mind that the book of Ruth, none of the Bible books were written with chapters. Chapters, that's a later edition. It was just one continuous book. So basically, we have one verse there later, then we have another verse and a third verse, Ruth 4 verse 2. And he took 10 men of the elders of the city and said, sit you down here, and they sat down. So again, I wondered, why 10? Why not 9? Why 8? Why not 8? Why 10 specifically? So basically, I realized, okay, we have a 6, we have a 10. It must be of significance and must be applicable to the story of Ruth as the bride of Christ. So whilst I was doing some research on Ruth, I thought to ask Google, in what year did Ruth go to Bethlehem? Because I didn't know. And the answer I got was, based on biblical scholarship, Ruth returned to Bethlehem with Naomi around 1100 to 1160 BC. And then I went to the moon phases and just to see what I could find within that time span. And I found that 1151 BC corresponds with 2025, and 1150 corresponds with 2026. You can see all the dates are similar, April the 13th, and etc. This would be when Ruth left, and this would be when she arrived at Passover. So in 1150, she arrived at Passover, and then she went through to Shavuot, which is June 6, and in 2026, it's the same. So then I thought, but okay, let's see if we can figure this out. And we have 2 New Years. We have the agricultural New Year, and we have the the prophetic New Year. And this is Tishri. So I just counted from Tishri, Gregorian months. So 1, 2, 3, and I got to June, it's the 10th month. So we have a 10 and a 6, and that's 10th month is June, and the 6th is the 6th, and it happens to be Shavuot. So we know that Ruth went to Bethlehem in 1150 BC, and it's Shavuot both in 1150 and 2026. So the 6/6/26 date on the timeline looks like it could be a confirmation for that. Now, I'm not saying that that is when the tribulation begins or anything. I'm just saying that this looks like a definite marker date or an important date. And I was, I found this very interesting, and I thought to share this with you guys. There could be something that I'm still missing with regards to the dream that I had, because unfortunately I can never remember my dreams. And I'm sure if the dream is from Jesus, it must frustrate him endlessly, because I can only remember the part normally when I start to wake up. Okay, and now we're going to be looking at the timeline. But before we begin with the timeline, you'll see that I have Nisan 1 over here. It's 3 April. And I just quickly need to explain that to you, why it is 3 April and not 2 April, or even 1 April for that matter, on the full moon calendar. And then in red here, I have the prophetic calendar, which is basically just the second Passover calendar. I just quickly need to explain that before we continue. Okay, so here we have 2026, and in blue we have the full moon calendar, beginning of the year full moon. And then 1 month after that, the 1st of May, we have the prophetic calendar. But that is just also another name for it, would be, I suppose, the second Passover calendar. But I prefer to call it the prophetic calendar. Now, during the time of Jesus, and this was from about 1,000 to 500 years before Christ to about 500 to 1,000 years after Christ, these two calendars were always in sync. I actually went through the whole time period there, and they were every single year they began on the same date. So the Star Abib lined up after the spring equinox, and that was the same. But due to the precession of the equinox today, in some years, not every year, we have that the prophetic calendar lags the full moon calendar. And because the full moon calendar is based on the equinox, so it's earth based, and that would be your Nisan 14 calendar. I'm going to explain the Nisan 14-15 calendars quickly again. And the prophetic calendar in the Mazzaroth is heaven based, and that would be your Nisan 15 calendar. And some years they don't lag, like I've mentioned before, but last year we had a very unique sequence in that it was a 13-month year and it lagged, which made it possible that we had the 3 feast days in the month of Tishri in December. And if you recall, I ran a timeline from when was it? 1st of Nisan in the year 32, the crucifixion, and the 10th of Nisan, Palm Sunday, all the way to December, the 14th of December 2020, where the first part of the abomination was given, and I got 726,348 days and 726,339 days. And G7 to 6, we all know that's strong concordance, that's Arpazo. And then I just took the 348th day and the 339th day of the year, and respectively that was 4 December and 13 December, which was the Feast of Trumpets on the Mazzaroth in 2025 and the Day of Atonement. And that is how the timeline began from there. So, okay, so basically I think you now understand the difference between the two. The prophetic calendar you can just call the second Passover calendar. You can see that it's mentioned in Numbers, and it says the 14th day of the second month. So both calendars are very important, and I love how this is done now, because during the time of Jesus they were in sync, but now there is a difference, and not every year, like I said, but only in some years. And this made all these calculations possible. Okay, and then I quickly need to show you why I used April the 3rd on the timeline, and not April the 2nd as it's indicated here. Now, you know that the full moon changes from one day to the next, 6 o'clock in the morning. So on the timeline, on the full moon calendar, this would be April the 1st still. And this is at 12 minutes past 2 UTC time, which makes it 12 minutes past 4 Israel time. So this is the 2nd of April. And here you can see this is in Jerusalem. And here you can see the horizon, you can see the moon is setting. Now you always have to place yourself in the shoes of the Israelites. Now they only looked whether the moon was full or not as it rose. So when the moon rose on the first, that would be the first 10, of course, that would not have counted as a full moon. So here the moon is setting, so a couple more minutes, it's below the horizon. And then at 6 o'clock, it changes from April the 1st to April the 2nd. And as the moon rose that afternoon, or that evening at dusk, they would have counted that as the beginning of the new month. That's the full moon. So that is April the 2nd is the full moon. But of course, I used April the 3rd, and I'm going to explain why as well. And here you can see the two different calendars. We have the Nisan 14 and Nisan 15 calendar. And these are basically just the difference between the Synoptic Gospels and the Gospel of John, where they respectively have the crucifixion on the 14th or the 15th. Now, the Nisan 14 calendar is earth-based, and the Nisan 15 calendar would be heavenly based. So in the book of Joshua, God froze the whole universe for 24 hours, or a day. It could be 12 hours, but let's call it 24 hours, so that Joshua's army could defeat the enemy. And in that time, the Nisan 14 calendar, everything, the sun, moon, and stars were frozen, but time in heaven continued. And this is why heaven is one day ahead of earth time. And this is just basically the difference between the Nisan 14 and 15 calendars. So you can see there's a new moon day, and then that would be now April the 2nd as the moon rose, and the next day is April the 3rd, Nisan 1. And on the Nisan 15 calendar, that would be April the 2nd, and that would be April the 3rd. And then the new moon day like this only happens in the beginning of the year. On the Nisan 14 calendar, every last day of the month would be a normal day. That evening, the full moon would be sighted. That would be new moon day. And then it would just go to the next day, and the cycle would continue. And the two calendars basically just run offset by a day the whole year. And that is the difference, and it is indicated in the Bible also. And it explains why it is like that in the Bible. Okay, now finally we can begin with the timeline. Now, you recall we had the 3 Apostle alerts December, and via Paul's shipwreck, it jumped 30 days to January. And both are basically symbolic representations of the Passover. And quite interesting, if you count them, you will see that they use the Nisan 15 calendar, which is of course heaven based. But suddenly here you'll see that it's Nisan 14. Now this is because this is the physical Passover, and it's earth based. This is what actually happened, and this is why it's the Nisan 14 calendar. And I love how this basically confirms. Now in January, there was many indicators to January the 3rd. I'm trying to recall some now. If you recall from Esther's timeline, I had 187 days. And basically from 3i Atlas, if you count 187 days, you got to the 3rd of January. I also ran a timeline from Jesus' birthday to the 2nd of January. It was 2027 years and 100 days. And then I worked out the precision of the equinox over that time period. I got 1 day, 6 hours and 15 minutes. And if you add that to 6 o'clock in the morning on the 2nd of January, you got to 12:15 on the 3rd of January, which was the time of the full moon. And basically when it rose that evening, that would be the 3rd of January, new month, and indicated the end of Tishri. And that was Tishri, of course, which we had the first set of Apostle alerts. Then also the 187 days, if you counted it from 7th of October 2025, which was the Feast of Trumpets, on the full moon calendar, then you go to the 12th of January. It's not in there. I've left out a lot of things because I'm sure you recall that the previous timeline looked like a bowl of spaghetti, and it was confusing even to me. And then after that, of course, we have Ascension. And I still mentioned in a previous video, that the 27th of February for me is an important day, and it would be a high watch day. But it's quite interesting if you look at the 28th of January. That's the 28th of January at 6:15 in the morning is when the USA attacked Iran. And so basically the 27th Ascension Day finished, and in the first hour after the next day, well, the first hour after the session they finished, America attacked Iran. But on the 27th, we have 3 timelines going out. We have 100 days, and this is inclusive counts, all the day counts, to the 6th of June. Now that's the date that I had in a previous video, and this is also the date that I got from Ruth that you saw earlier. And then also 80 days to the 17th of May, which is first fruits on the second Passover calendar, so the completion of Passover. And I thought this was rather amazing. And then, of course, the 100 days that you see at the top here, if you split it down the middle, 50 days exactly, you get to Nisan 14, which is Passover, which is true Passover. So I just thought it was rather remarkable that all these counts are round numbers and perfect fit. Okay, so then we've got the Passover here. And then on the resurrection day, and I called this a day of blessing. Now, I had various options, and some of these timelines, there is, especially the 1335 day one, there is some options available. But I chose this one because resurrection is a blessing, and it runs for 335 days, and we get to the 13th of December, which is the day of blessing, and it's one day before the 14th of December, where this 10 years come in here from the 14th of December 2020, which is the Feast of Tabernacles, and also the solar eclipse in the middle of the 2 other solar eclipses that were 6 years, 6 months, 6 weeks, 6 days apart, and that was where the first part of the abomination was given. And this is also the period where the 5 months that the scorpions strike the people begin. And that ends, of course, when on the day that Israel turns 81 years old. And this is also from Apophis, the 1 year, 1 month, and 1 day, where the 4 angels that are prepared in the book of Revelation are released to kill 1/3 of mankind. So, okay, we've got the second Passover, and I think I've basically discussed everything over there. And I've got some numbers in here, which I'm working on at present moment. That would be trumpets. But then a couple of days ago, I saw a video by 2 gentlemen, and I think their channel's called Watchmen for That Great Day. And they went through the book of Daniel, and I found that very interesting. And I thought, let me just see how this would fit in on this timeline. And I was quite surprised that it does fit indeed. And okay, now you can see Daniel's fast begins on 6 April. And that would be the 3rd of Nisan. Now you have to count inclusively. I'll show you quickly. So this is actually should be there, but I didn't have enough column space there. So I'm going to show you how Daniel's count works. So this is just to show you where Daniel's fast begins. So he fasted for 21 days. You can see that's his fast there. And the Bible says that it ended on Nisan 24, on the 24th day. So it has to start on Nisan 4 because it's counting inclusively always. So that would be day 1 going to 24. And then the corresponding dates, April the 3rd, and it's just April the 6th then, running to the 26th. So very simple, basic. Okay, so Daniel begins his fast on the 6th of April. He fasts till the 24th. It's 21 days. And that's 24th of Nisan. And then counting 21 days from there, because those gentlemen had 3 sets of 21 days, brings us to the 17th of May, which is first fruits on the second Passover calendar. And counting 21 days from there brings us to 6th of June, which is the possible day for the tribulation to begin. And very interesting is that it is exactly 60 days or 2 prophetic months. Now you might ask, how do I get to that? Because it's 21 times 3 over here. But you need to take into consideration that there is an inclusive count over there. That is a second inclusive count and a third inclusive count. And that would be 60 days or 2 prophetic months. Now this is one possible interpretation, and I must say I was quite surprised to see how well it fits. But there is a problem that I have, and I am still working on it and thinking about it. Because the book of Daniel And people often confuse the book of Daniel and the book of Jeremiah. Now, in the book of Jeremiah, the bow of Elam is broken. But that is a different story because the whole book of Daniel starts with the writing on the wall with King Belshazzar, and that is the king of Babylon, and then how he is defeated by Cyrus, king of Persia. And then in the third year of King Cyrus's reign is when Daniel has the vision. So if we want to apply that to today, to what's happening right now, then the only possible explanation would be that Persia is Iran, and that Babylon would be the petrodollar system, and that is going to be defeated because there's no other way to apply that book of Daniel. You can't bring the book of Jeremiah, which tells a different story about Elam, into the fray. So if I have to apply Daniel, there's only one way. So what I did is I had a look at Cyrus, and Cyrus entered Babylon as the victor on the 29th of October in the year, I think it's 539 BC. And this is the 20, I've got it here now, it's the 29th of October 2029, but it's the 29th of October, the year 539, and that's according to the prophetic calendar. And that is just a way of taking the Gregorian calendar as we have it today and going back as if there is no Julian or anything, just taking the dates back. And it's very accurate because our calendar is much more accurate, and that gives you a very accurate indication of the day that it happened. So if I take into consideration that King Cyrus was already, well, it was King Cyrus's third year where Daniel had his vision, and this is where King Cyrus enters Babylon or defeats, he makes his entry. Then I counted from there, the 29th of October, and it's exactly 3.5 years on the Gregorian calendar, by the inclusive count, so starting to the 28th of April. And I just thought to myself, why does it have to be 3.5 years exactly? Why couldn't it be 3.5 years and 2 days? Why exactly 3.5 years? And it frustrated me, but I'm just beginning to research this. I will probably have more answers at a later stage. But I just want to show you something as well, with regards then to the 24 days of the fast towards the end year. Okay, so the 29th of October 539 BC, when King Cyrus entered Babylon, is fairly well documented. There's clay tablets and various things that exist, and that's how they could determine the date. And now, if we look at 2033, so that is now, he entered Babylon on the 29th of October, and that's the session year. That the first year would begin then in April. And if you count 3 years from there, you get to 2033. And you know that the 3.5 years ends here in April on the 28th. That's still 28 on the full moon calendar. Now, if we take into consideration that Daniel was advisor basically in Babylon to the king, and then after that, when King Cyrus defeated Babylon, to King Cyrus as well, obviously he would have used the calendar of the king. So if you take the Babylonian calendar, and that would be in the year beginning on March 30th, and you count 24 days from there, you get to April 24, which is Nisan 10. And that could be the 21 days of his fast, plus, of course, the 3 extra days, so 24 days. It is just an observation I have, and I didn't really want to add this into this video as it's premature, but it just bothered me that the 3.5 years fits so perfectly. It shouldn't have. I mean, if it didn't, then I would have been a much happier camper. But listen, this is all I think that I have for today. We have various iWatch dates. I would say April the 6th, where the 21-day count begins, April 24th, where it ends, and then of course, March 17, first fruits on the second Passover calendar, and then of course, if nothing happens, then 6 June. Now keep note, I'm not saying that anything is going to happen on these dates. I'm not saying anything is happening on 6 June either. I'm just saying that there's a lot of variables that seem to add up and point to certain dates. They could again be pointers pointing to a later date, but we are now getting to the point where it will no longer be able to be in April 2033 if we continue, because from June the 6th, it's 2,520 days, which is the 2 times 42 months to the 28th of April in the year 2033. So yeah, that's all I have. God bless each and every one of you. Goodbye.